What's up, everybody, and welcome to a Monday Stanley Cup Final edition of Morning Cup of Hockey presented by Bet365. That's Colby Cohen. I'm Johnny Lazarus. Hope you all had a wonderful Father's Day weekend and got to enjoy Game 5 on Saturday night. We will have Kristi Dosh joining us at about 9:30 to talk NIL. So we got a lot of different topics we're going to cover today. Colby, I don't want to piss you off right off the bat, so I'll ask you how your Father's Day weekend was, and then I'll get your juices flowing a little bit. So
just get to it, Johnny. You're going to annoy me this morning, so just get to it.
He's already pissed off because I made my point in the pre-show, but last week I said to Chris and Dan Powers when they came on, I believe on Thursday, to me, it puts less pressure on the Oilers being down 3-1 at home than being tied 2-2 at home. And what did we see? We see the Florida Panthers not only now be 7-1 on the road in Game 5s under Paul Maurice, but now 3-0 in Game 5s when those series are tied at 2-2. The Florida Panthers came into Edmonton and took it from the Oilers. The narrative is much different now going into Game 6 than it would have been had the Oilers been down 3-1 and won that game at home to make it 3-2 going to Florida. Colby, I know I'm right. So what's your?
I at this point, I feel like you're just doing this for attention and stupidity. I know you were trying on Saturday night to goat me into a Twitter fight with you by screenshotting my text message conversation with you, which is
here we go.
Not something you should ever get into with me because of the things that you say in our text conversation. But I would never do that because I'm just not like that. How dumb could you sound? Honestly, I get it. You think it's funny to act this way, but explain to me this, Johnny.
Yeah.
If they went to Edmonton down 3-1 and Florida won in Edmonton the other night, what would have happened?
It wouldn't have happened.
Answer my question. Yes or no?
I'm telling you how.
If it was 3-1 and they went back to Edmonton and Florida went out and won the hockey game like they did, not Fantasyland, Johnny, results, real results. What would have happened after the game? When the buzzer,
they would have lost. They would have lost.
The Stanley Cup would have came out.
I'm telling you,
they would have presented it to Barkov. They would have skated around and celebrated. They would have gone out in Edmonton that night and partied. And then the Edmonton Oilers season would be over. And your pal that you think deserves a cup would have gone another year without a cup. So how does this make any sense what you're saying?
I'm telling you how
you're just being annoying here. There's no
I'm telling you how
to it.
pressure and narratives work. If Florida is up 3-1 going into Edmonton, it's don't let Edmonton get one. Then they're back in this series. And all of a sudden, all they got to do is win one road game and we got a Game 7 back at their place.
But we're playing Johnny Sunshine and Rainbow.
I'm telling you how narratives work. This is all I'm saying.
Okay, but we play the game.
Colby, take your literal hat off for 1 second. When I say these things, half of me is kidding, half of me is serious.
You bring this up every day.
Let me finish, because this is how the media works. This is narratives. We always talk narratives. This is just how it is. Just don't take me 100% literally for 1 fucking second of your life, and understand what I'm saying.
Okay, so you're full of shit, is what you're saying.
Half of me is not. Half of me is.
So you came in today's show and your main argument off the top was I'm going to be full of shit. That's
no. My main argument was I made that joke last week, and I feel like I was right. I was validated with how that game went in Game 5 because 2-2 on home ice. There's a lot of pressure on the home team to find a way to win that game, because otherwise you're going on the road and they're planning a party in Florida right now to take this thing in 6. Where if Edmonton had won Game 5 down 3-1, it's holy shit, we better not let them win this one on the road, because we do not want to go back there for a Game 7, which they are thinking right now, but they think they have this thing in the bag. It's just a different feeling. But you're taking me way too literally. This is how it is.
I'm just going off of the results of the hockey game, where was one of the
You'll
more.
Never say, Johnny, you were right.
One of the more. Say, Johnny, you were right.
You'll just never go with the joke. You'll never go.
You're not even in the realm of.
Is this better?
Here.
This oddly makes sense to me.
I just don't think that you're in the realm of correct. I just don't understand it. I don't understand how you watched
the Panthers were blocking Game 5. They came out and they won.
Better that they would have been down 3-1. I just don't understand the world that you live in. I'm trying. I'm not really trying.
Did I not say the Panthers were a lock in Game 5? Did I not say that?
If you say so, I don't remember. But
here we go. I don't remember. I'm
just saying, I don't know. If you said that they're a lock, that they were a lock. I don't. Okay, like I'm not saying you didn't say that. I don't remember you saying they're a lock, but I just don't understand how in your brain you think it's better to be down in a series 3-1 than tied 2-2. I don't understand that.
I'm talking about the way pressure and narratives work in a playoff series. That's it.
You mean fantasies, though? Because
sure.
like you think anybody inside those locker rooms are sitting there going, "It's better to be down 3-1."
I'm saying media. I'm not saying there.
Okay, so
it has nothing to do with the players.
So you're like, okay,
pressure and narratives.
I'm okay pushing a bullshit narrative here.
Yes.
That has nothing to do with reality.
Has everything to do with reality.
All right.
I said the Panthers are going to win Game 5.
So that's how we're going to leave this. Okay. Yep. I like this. We're going in circles here because like I can't comprehend the level of stupidity that you have this morning. So
thank you.
I don't
exactly.
I
can't
don't
comprehend
know,
it. Exactly.
I don't know what to say to you other than watching that hockey game. I mean, look, Edmonton has responded with their backs against the wall plenty of times in these playoffs, but I actually think even though that game was closer than the game, the shit kicking from 2 games prior, I actually don't think that game was closer. Like, I know the score was closer, but I just felt like Edmonton looked super out of gas. I felt like
not in the beginning.
The mistakes that they made were all fatigue-based mistakes. I mean, you start with Marchand's first goal in that game, and Podkolzin completely loses his guy on the face-off, who's the eventual goal scorer.
I don't even think he lost his guy. I think he just didn't even try. Well, Marchand is just like Kevin BX did a great breakdown, Colby, of like being face-off ready. Marchand, he went back to even 2011 Game 7 against the Canucks, where Marchand, the first goal was scored because Marchand wins a race on a face-off. He makes that cutback and then a pass to Bergeron. Like, this is Brad Marchand. It's a strength that he has. Like, just being face-off ready, being dialed in right from the puck drop of every shift. Like, Bieksa was showing clip after clip after clip. Like, that's all individual effort on Brad Marchand. That's all that is. I don't think you can't say Podkolzin lost his guy. He wasn't dialed. He wasn't ready.
Can I just ask you a simple question then? What? If you say he didn't lose his guy, who did Brad Marchand line up against?
Brad Marchand beat everybody on the ice. He beat all 5 players.
Who did he line up next to?
That's not losing your guy. It's not like he just made
when you take a face off, your job is to get into your guy. It's to get into your guy. That's your first job on a face off. So he lost his guy. He lost Marchand. You can't let Marchand beat you to the inside there and then go win a puck battle. I'm not like he loses
he wasn't
his guy.
Ready to play. He was not engaged. I'm not saying he wasn't ready for the face-off, like the ref dropped the puck and he wasn't ready. I'm saying he was not engaged in the play. This guy's brain was off.
Okay. And then Ekholm gets a little bit caught outside the dots there. But these are just, to me, these are like mental fatigue type of errors. I mean, and whether it was the Barkov forecheck on was it Bennett's goal, where, I mean, again, it's
I think that was Reinhardt's goal.
It was Reinhardt's goal. Yeah. And then on the Bennett goal, I don't know if you want to pull the Bennett goal up, Vic. The amount of bodies that are just hyper focused on the puck. Nobody's looking around. Nobody's looking for, who's going to the net. Who am I looking around? Listen, like, you sent me a text message before the game that stated, tonight we'll decide whether you should pay a goaltender in the National Hockey League or not. And while I don't think Pickard was as bad as everybody is pointing it out, like, oh, it was all his fault. It was all his fault. He certainly didn't do his team any favors. He certainly didn't steal any. He certainly didn't come up with any, game breaking saves. And now the question becomes, who starts in game? Like, you have a real problem if you don't know definitively who your starter is in game 6 of the Stanley Cup Finals when both goaltenders are healthy. That is a big, big problem. And, I've harped on this with our Oilers guys. And listen, I thought Edmonton would win this series. I do not think that's going to happen anymore, unfortunately, to our Oilers faithful here in the chat with us right now. But, I've kind of been saying this for a couple of years, and I know that Stuart Skinner has been really good at times during the playoffs. Calvin Pickard's 7-1 in the playoffs on his record. Yeah. So you're not saying they didn't win because of this guy, but it does seem like in bigger moments as the playoffs go along, they're just not getting the extra save that they need at the right time. And again, I don't look at Pickard and say he had a stinker. I don't look at those goals. The Bennett goal, it's a tough bounce.
Bounce.
It's a perfect little rebound for him. Marchand just makes 2 incredibly skilled plays. That's not his fault, right? A redirection off of Wallman. That might have been one of the worst games we've seen Wallman have in the playoffs. Whether it was getting danced, whether it was losing pucks on breakouts, he had a tough game, but, you just you're not getting the big save in the big moment. And, I think I don't think Bob has been a superstar in the playoffs, but I think in the bigger moments, he finds a way to dial himself in and make saves that are timely. They might not even be flashy, but they're just timely. And I said this, you remember me saying this during game 7 last year. I remember that one extra save. Remember that 1 or 2 saves that Bob makes that he probably shouldn't in game 7. And that's the difference of a 1-goal game. And again, it's not ideal right now if you're an Edmonton Oiler fan, because it does look like you're going to come up short. Now, if you're Edmonton, you just got to go win a hockey game, right? Because then you get to go home for game 7 and it's anything goes. And look, in 2011, teams, the Bruins group is down at every juncture, down 0-2, then 2-2, then down 3-2. So it can happen. It can, but you'd certainly rather be sitting in the driver's seat here at any point of the series. And it goes back to our stupid argument that we had to start the show is you never want to be down in a series under any circumstance. I don't care what, false reality you live in. You want to be up in a series. You do. And look, I hope Edmonton can go to Florida and win a game so we can just see a game 7. At that point, get your dice out, right? Go to that roulette wheel. Who the hell knows what's going to happen? But at the end of the day, the Florida Panthers are clearly in the driver's seat, deservedly so. They have been the better team in the bigger moments in the last couple of games. And it's just been, it's been more of the same Florida Panthers team that's played in 2 Stanley Cup Finals, 3 Stanley Cup Finals, and 1 last year.
I want to challenge what you said quick, though, just rewinding for 1 second. And I did agree with you because Wayne Gretzky said the same thing, I believe, after the game. He said, if you're questioning your goalie going into game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final, if you're questioning who the starting goalie is, you don't have one. That's what Wayne said. You don't have a starting goalie if you're questioning who your starting goalie is at this time of the year in game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final. And Colby, you basically just said something similar, right? You were like, if you're deciding right now, Stanley Cup Final, that's a problem. But I don't think, but I don't think we'd be saying that about the Boston Bruins last year. If it was between Swayman and Ullmark in the Cup Final, I don't think we'd be saying that. That was a good problem to have last year for that team. Right now, I think.
Yes and no, Johnny. Yes and no. Yes and no, because
if that's what you do all year,
it doesn't need to be a talking point right now. It just doesn't.
The goalies
players should not be wondering who's playing goalie, right? Because honestly, I bet you in that locker room right now, half the group thinks Stuart Skinner should be back in, and half the group thinks Calvin Pickard should be in the net. And nobody will ever come out and admit that. Not a single player publicly will ever come out and say that. But I'm telling you right now, players are wondering who's starting. And listen, maybe they've already told the goaltenders, Johnny, every coach is a little bit different, but half that team is sitting there wondering who is starting for their team. And I do not think that is the case right now. Like, this is not something you want in your locker room for Game 6. And I didn't hear what Wayne Gretzky said, but it's like, clearly it's always nice to say something that he said, because I mean, that would be the authority on situations and the game of hockey. It's Wayne Gretzky. And like, I think that, I don't want to say it could create a divide in the locker room, because it didn't, but Johnny, what happens if you're in the camp of Stuart Skinner should start and they go with Calvin Pickard? What if Connor McDavid, like, again, all right, I'm gonna throw a hypothetical at you, which I generally hate, but what happens if McDavid silently thinks, let's go to Skinner, and Knobloch rolls out Picard, okay? And they lose. Then what happens for the rest of the summer? Is McDavid sitting there second guessing his coach for the rest of the summer? Again, we'll never know it publicly, but like, it's just not good for your room. It's not good for your organization. It's not good for business whatsoever.
Would there ever be a case for a coach to go to his captain and say, "Hey, Connor, you're our leader. Who do you think we should start?" Or is it that's all internally with the coaches? There's no way they'd bring the captain into that conversation. And I saw Sam Static in the chat saying, like, it doesn't really matter who's starting it at this point. I don't think it actually matters. I don't.
I can't imagine or I can't imagine they're bringing Connor McDavid into that discussion.
No.
Even if you whether you want to argue,
the voice of the room.
Agreed, but I don't even think Connor McDavid. I'm not. Listen, I don't know. My opinion is no, you're not going to McDavid for that. I don't think so. Other people may think differently. I'd love to know. Like, you'd almost have to ask a guy who's a superstar that question. You know what I mean?
Okay, so let me ask you this:
have a different level of treatment that they get. And I just want to touch on Tage fan 7272's comment. Well, Wayne Gretzky, the coach that couldn't coach, even though it was Arizona. So I'm not sure if you're like saying, well, Arizona stinks or Gretzky was not a good coach. The reason Wayne Gretzky can't coach is because the most advanced play is the most simple play to him. And I got to tell you, like, I've heard this from other Hall of Fame types of players. Those guys struggle with your everyday player because to them it looks so easy. Every play is so easy. Like, it's hard for maybe Wayne Gretzky to understand why you didn't make that play, because he could do it blindfolded in his sleep. And that's where I think some players at that caliber, they don't make good coaches, right?
It's not relatable.
Because it's exactly, they can't relate to anybody at all. So that would be my I saw that comment from you, Tage. And again, I wasn't sure with like exactly the tone of that, but I at least want to say, like, I think that's probably why Wayne Gretzky would never be a successful NHL coach. Johnny, go ahead. You want to get through your point.
Well, no, I was going to ask you, because we're having this goalie conversation. And also, I just want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Proraso. We got a little bit too heated before we gave our Proraso shout out, which we usually do in the first 2 minutes of the show. But Proraso is the most complete choice for shaving and beard care, made in Italy since 1948. Proraso has been a staple of Italian culture and barbershops globally for 4 generations. So get 15% off at Proraso-USA.com with our promo code Hockey15 in all caps, Hockey15. And this is the question that's always asked or always, talked about amongst goalies. Like, you stick with the guy that got you there. But looking at both guys, Colby, Stuart Skinner, 7 wins. Calvin Pickard, 7 wins. Which guy do you look at the start of the playoffs and say, this is the guy that got them there? Because I actually think there's an argument that it is Calvin Pickard. He comes in the first round, they're down 2-0 to LA, and wins 4 straight games. Like, he changes the entire course of Edmonton's postseason run. So if you're having the conversation of you got to play the guy that got you there, to me, I think it's Calvin. I do. If Calvin doesn't get hurt in the second round, he's the starting goalie.
Yeah, but that's a big if. And didn't
But
Skinner
think that's
closed
the right
out?
point.
I listen, I'm not saying you can't make the argument. Like, you definitely have a leg to stand on with the argument, but I think you also, and you're right. And Marvin in the chat says Pickard got them there because he saved the LA series. He definitely did his part, but who closed out the last couple of series, right? Skinner did. He did. He came in and closed out the last couple of series. And so I think you can make the argument either way. And look, I can remember even going back to some of the Stanley Cups that the Chicago Blackhawks won. Scott Darling came in the one year and played some games in the Nashville series when Corey Crawford was struggling. Yeah. Alex Lyon helped the Florida Panthers get on their run a little bit.
He just played like the first two, three.
I'm games. Just not the same thing. I'm just saying traditionally there have been, I go back more to I remember being in Nashville because I went down to see and stay with Colin Wilson when they were playing Chicago. I think it was the first round, and Darling, I think, started 2 games in that first round. Started those games for Corey Crawford on their way to a Stanley Cup. So there are instances. I think you can make the argument either way. But having said that, and I'm not going to go too hard on this because he's not here to defend himself, but this is where, and Randy Workman's letting us know that Skinner has 3 shutouts in the playoffs. Absolutely. I'm just reading some comments about Wayne Gretzky that are going off in the chat. That is kind of funny. I have a feeling it's based in something else would be my guess. But so, like the Edmonton Oilers need to go out this offseason and solidify this position. Now, even if they win, which again, maybe you just win a hockey game and then you get to game 7, but don't you think it's a little bit nicer when you're sitting there in Florida or you're in Tampa or you're any of these teams, right? Ask the Toronto Maple Leafs fans how they feel going into the playoffs every year with a you're closing your eyes and picking who's going to start. This guy might be hurt. That guy hasn't played a lot of games in a row. You're splitting. Go get a fucking goalie if you can get one. The only people that want to argue not to pay a goalie and that you don't need a big-time goalie are the teams that don't have the big-time goalies. And Frank and I will disagree with this to our graves, okay? He's my biggest opponent in these arguments. But it's you feel better when you just, you don't have to think about who your goaltender is. It's just one less thing to talk about, to worry about. I don't think we even need to ask people. I think even an Edmonton Oiler fan right now in the chat would say that you'd rather have Bobrovsky right now. I think any Oiler fan would realistically even say that. You'd rather have a guy who you just know you can trust in the big moment, right? And the other
I didn't realize Vanacek was the backup until this series started. Honestly, I forgot
he plays every game. Yeah, the guy plays every game.
Yeah.
So, and now we're starting to see more Gretzky comments in the chat, and it's going to the place where I thought it was going. Who gives a shit who Wayne Gretzky aligns himself with politically? Who cares? That's if that changes your opinion on his hockey ability, then you're soft, man. You're soft. Whatever that guy wants to think of privately, publicly, who cares? It's not our business. God, the negativity surrounding Wayne Gretzky these days, who is the greatest ambassador to the game, who gives his time to the game. The guy doesn't need to be on television. He probably didn't even want to be, from what I understand, on television. So it's come on, changing your opinion about he's the great one, okay? I don't even want to go down this rabbit hole, but I'm seeing it in the chat, and it's
all right. Well, I'll change topics here because Jim the Swede, and we haven't really even talked about the Panthers. We really, again, like obviously the focus is on Edmonton right now because they're the one down 3-2 going into game 6, trying to force game 7. The Panthers, again, like they are the team at the top. And we've talked about that throughout the playoffs. But Jim the Swede said the most common thing about the two teams has been that have been to 3 straight Cup finals the last 6 years. Bob and Vasilevsky, both studs, high salaries, gets it done every single night. It's kind of crazy to think that the Conn Smythe talk, and I guess it's not that crazy because Marchand and Bennett have been that good, but Bob's name hasn't even really been brought up in the Conn Smythe conversation. And again, like he's the one constant just because it's more expected of him, right? Like when you make $10 million, like you're expected to make those saves. And, I guess like he hasn't had to go above and beyond because, Colby, I feel like the Panthers haven't necessarily stolen games. Like the games they win, they're usually the better team, right? Is that fair to say? Like,
although I think you really felt like, was it who won game 1? Was it Florida won game 1 of
no,
the series?
Edmonton won game 1. They were the much better
So it was
team.
game 2 then that Florida won, where I think you felt like Edmonton was the better team.
I thought Edmonton was the better team, but it didn't feel like Florida stole it. Like it was a pretty evenly played game. Like it's not like it was, this
Florida rarely comes out and lays an egg.
Exactly.
That's probably a very, very fair thing to say.
But with Bob, again, like he's just so steady, so consistent in goal for Florida, and we just haven't mentioned his name once. He's performed.
I don't think Bob is always put in a situation where he has to stand on his head. And it's funny because like a lot of the times Florida is so aggressive because they defend moving forward. They give up a lot of bigger chances, but they're one and done chances.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
well, look at those first 2 chances in game 5.
For the most part, they don't spend a ton of time where they're back on their heels being blitzed, right? Because again, they're so aggressive that they try to end plays. You rarely see them in the D zone shadowing a guy's hip pocket. For the most part, they get in and they try to make contact and they try to close plays off. And so I think with Bob, why he probably doesn't get that level of love is because he makes a lot of these little timely saves, especially early in hockey games. You almost forget about it by the end of the game. Florida, to me, is a team that generally gets better in the second and the third period, right? And we've seen that a lot. Mm-hmm. And so, like, I think Bob's his superpower is the fact that it's so timely. And sometimes it doesn't look like a big flashy save because he's just athletic and he's smooth. And so I think that's why, Johnny, we're not talking, like, I don't think Bob has had to be a Conn Smythe goaltender for the playoffs. Now, I remember some games earlier in the playoffs where he made 2 or 3 breakaway saves in a 1-goal game, and then Florida goes down and makes it 3-1.
Yeah,
right?
You think about game 7 against Toronto.
Exactly. Like those are big, let's call them 4-point swings like we do in the standings, right? Like where it's a 1-goal game and he makes a big save and then they go down and score a goal. So, I think that's probably why we're not, we're not talking, about him in that breath or in that regard.
And I'll say this, just going to Dom H's comment in the chat. He said Panthers have been the better team all series. Anyone saying otherwise is kidding themselves. I think the first 2 games Florida was better. I think the last 3 games, I think the first 2 games Edmonton was better. I think the last 3 games Florida was better. So either way, you're getting the 3-2 Panthers series lead that we have. Like it's deserved right now for Florida. Like I don't think anyone's sitting here saying Florida doesn't deserve to have this 3-2 series lead. But the way the series started, like had Edmonton gone out and scored that overtime goal in game 2, that's huge. Obviously, it's a what if, it's if things were different, they'd be different. But the first 2 games, I thought Edmonton was a much better team than what we've seen over the last 3. I think they've become a little bit, unraveled isn't the right word, but maybe a little more panicked, like lineup decisions too, right? They've taken out Kasperi Kapanen. I think there's a little bit more panic as far as Edmonton goes than there has been for Florida.
I don't know if it's panic because here's the thing. This team's made it to the Cup Finals 2 years in a row with the same coach. I think for the most part, 95% of those decisions that Knobloch makes have worked out and have paid off. And so you're gonna miss a decision every once in a while.
Well,
and so I don't think there's necessarily panic in those situations, Johnny.
The last one, just because Kristi's here and I don't want to keep her waiting, but
hold on, I do want to ask you one or two more things before we get to Kristi, and we will, but I do want to ask you this. No, I want to ask you this because I want to give Kristi a full introduction and time. We've got all this goaltending conversation and all this Conn Smythe conversation. So let me just hit you with these two questions before we get to her. Okay. Who are you starting for the Edmonton Oilers?
Skinner.
Okay. I think me too. I think I'm going to Skinner as well. I just think the upside is bigger for Stuart Skinner.
Even though I said that Calvin's the one who got him here.
Yeah, you not being well thought out is kind of a normal thing.
But I just think I have more blind faith in Skinner for whatever reason.
Fair. Listen, you go with your gut, and your gut says Skinner. Me too, by the way. I'm going with Skinner all day. Yeah. And that's where I said the locker room is probably split on that, man. All right. Conn Smythe.
Bennett.
You're staying with Bennett.
Staying with Bennett.
I think Brad Marchand has taken the reins on that with the big moment play and the recency of him doing it. I know it's a full playoff award, Johnny.
Sam Bennett still has made big plays and big moments.
Agreed. Scored a goal the other night, a big goal.
He's got goals in 4 of the 5 games in this series.
Yeah, but I mean, the media votes on the Conn Smythe.
Yeah, the media would lean toward Brad Marchand.
Exactly. That's why I think Brad Marchand wins it. So, all right, listen, before we read Kristi in, before we read her in, I just want to give a little bit of background here on Kristi. Okay. So we were working on a bit, like, we both got brought into a business project together a couple of years ago from a mutual friend, and we became friends sitting on this board together. And Kristi has a website called it's just Business of College Sports, not The Business of College Sports, which she started years ago. She's been on television for ESPN. She's a lawyer, but she's been on the forefront of this NIL stuff for a while. Like, she was the go-to authority for this. Now, a lot of other people, agents, lawyers, are jumping on the bandwagon, but Kristi was one of the first to really dig her heels into this. And again, she's an attorney. She's a writer. She just put a book out called The Athlete's NIL Playbook. And it's about, and it says, the complete guide to owning and profiting from your name, image, and likeness. And one of the reasons that I really wanted to have Kristi on today was I wanted to talk to her about her book, but I also wanted to talk to her about how the NIL is affecting college sports. And specifically, one of the things we always get from our chat is they ask us about, we heard Canadian players cannot receive NIL money. We all see the numbers out there about Gavin McKenna's going to get $250,000 to go to a school. There's other rumors about players getting X that are Canadian players coming from the CHL with the new rules. And so these are all questions that I think we wanted to talk about with Kristi. I have not got, it's funny, the book that I ordered, one of these books on Amazon, it's being delivered today, but Kristi has sent me excerpts from the book at times where I've needed help with things. And she's a great advisor for me. She's somebody I lean on greatly for this. And so, I thought today would be a good day to have her on to talk about this stuff, Johnny. So, obviously the game was Saturday. Yep. It's Monday. The next game is until Tuesday. We want to save some game day talk for tomorrow, because we do need to build up to the game tomorrow. It could be the last game. We have no idea. So Johnny, I don't know if you have a sponsor you need to read her in with, but if not, Vic, why don't you bring Kristi in and we can introduce her to everybody and start talking with her. And Kristi, what a great jersey to have over your shoulder just to come in with a bang.
So I didn't put that up for just you guys. I always have that up there. And it is the best conversation starter. No matter who I get on a call with all across the country, everybody comments on the Thrashers jersey. And I'm from Atlanta. I was my senior year of high school when they came in. I was a practicing lawyer when they left. And my brother gave me that jersey for my birthday about 3 weeks before they announced they were leaving. So it still has the tags, never been worn.
Is there a player on the back? I was going to ask who's the player that comes to mind.
You know what? I have no idea. I don't think that there is.
All right. I always think Ilya Kovalchuk when I see that one, but I don't know about
he was definitely the most popular player in Atlanta. And the thing was, growing up in Atlanta, I did not grow up watching hockey. No one I knew played hockey because we didn't have a pro team and we didn't have a college nearby with a team. Hockey was just not a thing. I was a big Braves fan. They went from worst to first when I was a little kid. And so I had to learn hockey when I was in college and law school. My brother played. He's 9 years younger than me, so he got super into it. And he would sit with me at the games and explain it to me. And I always say, about the time I could watch a game and really understand, they left.
Well, listen, they're coming. There's a team coming back. I don't know if you've seen the news. It sounds
my brother texts me everything that comes out about it because he's still in Atlanta. I'm not there anymore, but he is so excited that a team might come back.
Yeah, I mean, the rumor is that, you know, it was between them and Houston, and because of this latest approval that they got, Atlanta's the front runner to get another team. And I guess I'm just curious, like, how are they going to make it work this time? I mean, how many times are you going to try? Look, my biggest, the biggest thing that comes to mind for me whenever I think about hockey in Atlanta was when I was 21 years old after the Stanley Cup. I was in Miami at a nightclub and I was with Jeremy Roenick, and Lil Jon was DJing, and he loved the Atlanta Thrashers and hockey. He was a season ticket holder to the Atlanta Thrashers. He told me so. He still follows me on Twitter to this day, by the way, Little John, which is like a claim to fame. But the guy loved the Atlanta Thrashers and loved hockey. And so hopefully he'll restart his season tickets when they come. But that's what I think of.
It's going to be interesting because they're talking about putting it more kind of out in the metro area. They wouldn't be in downtown Atlanta like they were before. The Braves have, moved from downtown Atlanta to sort of a suburb. I think that's actually gone pretty well from them. It's very controversial. I just was talking to somebody about it at a conference last week. Happened years ago, and people are still very upset about it. But it'll be interesting to see if they get more support, if the attendance is a little better, if they can kind of restart something different by going out in the suburbs, because that's really where a huge bulk of the population lives. And especially, I would say that the people I know whose kids are playing hockey, that's out in the suburbs. It's not in the downtown Atlanta area. So maybe that'll work.
Yeah.
Colby, can I lead into the NIL stuff here?
Yeah.
Okay, because I see a great comment in our chat from Dylan LaPresti, who writes in like every single day, every show. And Kristi, just to give a heads up, we have a live chat like coming, as we're talking here. So we might go to some questions and whatnot for you. But just to lead this conversation, Dylan said he ran D1 track and NIL became a thing his sophomore year, and athletes were leaving programs just for money. It was always student athlete. Now it's just athlete. Pretty powerful comment right off the bat here. But what do you make of, Dylan's opinion?
Yeah. I talk to coaches in every sport, and they say if the first question an athlete asks them is how much money, and I'm going to get, they're done. You can ask about it, but it shouldn't be the first question out of your mouth. And I was just talking to my sister-in-law last night. My niece is a gymnast who yesterday was the first day she could get recruited for gymnastics. Then she started getting in touch with some D1 programs, reached out to her. And my sister-in-law said, working with these youth athletes, she was a Division II assistant conference commissioner. So she knows this space well. And she said, I've just been telling them, like, it's got to be the right fit. It has to be the right coach, the right school, the right town. You have to ask about, how much time you're actually going to get to play in your sport. Like, there's so many things that should come before the money conversation. But we all know that the money is becoming a bigger and bigger role. And with revenue sharing starting this coming year, it's going to become an even bigger part of the decision.
Well, let me ask you about that because, you were, and I don't know how early you were on, or if you heard me, like, you were on this so much earlier than everybody else. I mean, this was on your website before anybody else. Now we've got a lot of other lawyers and people, talking about it, which I think is great, by the way. I'm always for the more people talking about it, the better. But when you saw all this NIL stuff coming, it was always football, basketball, the big revenue generating sports. But, we operate in a smaller realm of hockey, which is a revenue generating sport. The men's programs at most of these schools do generate revenue. I'm curious from your perspective, like, did you think that this was going to make its way to these smaller, maybe smaller revenue generating sports? You're talking about gymnastics. We see it coming in hockey. We've got kids now that are coming from Canada, and we'll get to this, of the legalities of it, that are going to make not millions, but you're talking six figures plus now to come play college hockey in the United States.
Yeah, I mean, I can name 6 female athletes in Olympic sports off the top of my head who've made multiple 6 figures on their NIL. I do think I was one of the first that believed it would, have this trickle down effect and that there would be opportunities at all 3 levels. And I've said over and over as I've been promoting the book, like, I did case studies in the book on athletes you've never heard of. Like, the Cavender twins wrote my forward, and I'm so grateful. They said such wonderful things. They're not one of the case studies in my book because you can't model yourself after the Cavender twins and have that kind of success. So I have athletes from all 3 divisions. There are 2 Division III athletes in there that have been absolutely killing it with NIL, because so much of it really has to do, I think, with your personality, your social media presence, but your willingness to put yourself out there, not just put yourself out there on social media or publicly, but also being willing to reach out to brands. And so athletes who are sort of natural entrepreneurs have done really well. And we have seen in women's sports, gymnastics, volleyball, track and field, there are so many athletes I can name in those sports who have been earning big money. It's just all the headlines are about football and men's basketball because money is what causes someone to choose a certain school over another in so many instances. I don't think you see that as much when you get outside of football and men's basketball. Well, women's basketball to a smaller extent.
But I think also with that, and maybe this is just one experience I had, but I spent, some time with like younger junior hockey players about 2 months ago or whatever. And a lot of them were talking about like the way that they commit to college now is not the way, me or Colby had committed to college, me like 10 years ago. But it was like, I'll just go to this school and I'll tear it up for 1 year. And then I'll go to that school after doing well at like a smaller, less popular school. Like, it's not like I'm going to go here for 4 years. Like, that's not what it is anymore. Is that a common thing that you're seeing and hearing just with the changes of the landscape?
Yeah, this was actually a huge conversation last week. I was at the big national convention for athletic directors and other administrators in college athletics. And over again, I heard as a problem for administrators, not just retaining these athletes who they want to keep on campus and, who they recruit with the hopes that they're there for their entire athletic eligibility, but how do you then engage them as alums when they're an alum of 4 different schools? If they went to 4 different schools in 4 years. And then from a fan perspective, how do you keep fans engaged when they can't keep track of who's on the team? I went to Florida for law school, and we were joking, and me and someone else from Florida at the bar one night last week. I don't know if I can name 10 people on the team because they're moving around so much now that it's tough as a fan to stay engaged and to get invested in individual athletes.
That school needs college hockey, by the way. I love Gainesville so much. That place is awesome.
That would be nice. I live down in Florida. I'm in Northeast Florida, and unfortunately, it's like Atlanta was. Hockey's not big here.
Yeah. Do you, Kristi? Because look, our audience is mostly in NA. Like, these people care about the NHL, and what I'm trying to get across them is like, especially even the Canadian folks in here that are new. Like, there was a new rule out this year that the kids who play junior hockey in Canada can now go to the NCAA. It used to be you couldn't because they got some sort of paid stipend every week in the Ontario or in this Canadian Hockey League. So they were losing their amateurism status. And for those of you audio only, I'm air quoting because that word has become a joke. Do you have a crystal ball in all of these sports of how you think like it's going to trickle up? Like, are they going to become privatized entities that license Florida or like a BU? Like, are they going to go on their own, leave the NCAA college hockey and use the licensing agreements to have BU versus BC, but it's really just becoming a minor league to the National Hockey League? Like, is that something you're hearing people talk about? Because we've already seen rumors, and even I think the SEC commissioner said we're leaving the NCAA in 2028 or something like that.
Yeah, I haven't heard it with hockey, but it's a discussion about football that, again, I heard over and over last week, and we've been having for the last year or so, that there would be a potential model where you would take football out of universities. The teams could be privately owned. There's been a lot of talk about private equity coming into college athletics, and that this is sort of an alternative to that. You take football out, and really football is the sport I've heard mentioned over and over with this. And then that private entity would license the logos, the name, they'd pay to use the stadium on Saturdays. So there would still be some income coming into the university from football. But by pulling it out, I'm not advocating for this, but you do solve some problems. It's not part of your Title IX equation anymore. So that would vastly change what college athletics looks like. So it creates new problems as many as it solves. I don't think it's something that's imminently coming. Nobody I spoke with seem to believe that, but there is a lot of conversation around eligibility and what does eligibility look like anymore, because now you're getting these challenges, especially in football and basketball, from athletes who don't want their junior college time counted, or a year when they played one game and they got injured, they don't want that year counted. And we're seeing courts in different districts come to different decisions about that. And ultimately, I think the NCAA is going to have to work on the rules around that, but those are all subject to lawsuits and challenges. And so, again, not advocating for this necessarily either, but until there is collective bargaining, which would require athletes to be employees, you can't solve a lot of these problems in a way that is bulletproof from a legal perspective.
And let me ask you this, because I think this is a question we get all the time, and I've tried to answer it based on your book and based on information. Like I said, you shared excerpts with me from your book months and months ago, which I am very grateful for. But one of the big things we always get is, well, we heard Canadian players can't come to the US and get paid. And so we have this kid, he plays out in the Western Hockey League in a place called Medicine Hat, way out in British Columbia. I believe Medicine Hat is in British Columbia. I'm 90% sure. But correct me if I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, chat. I know you will. And there's this kid, Gavin McKenna. He's young. He's 17 years old, and he's going to be the #1 overall pick in the NHL draft. Not this year, but next year. Okay. So he needs a place to play in the meantime. And if he stays in that league out there, he's playing against very young kids. It's in Alberta, not British Columbia. So see, I knew the chat would correct me if I'm wrong. They do that quite often. And so he needs a place to play. And we're seeing rumors that schools are offering him $250,000. I actually know those numbers to be pretty fairly accurate, Kristi, based on what his agents are asking for. But he's Canadian, okay? So explain to us, how does that work? Because all we ever hear is these international kids are on student visas and they can't earn money while in the United States. So I'm just going to give you the floor and let you explain to us and our audience how this works.
Okay, so here's the simplest version I can give you is they can't work, and I'm putting that in quotes, while they're in the United States. And it's not work like we think about going to a 9-to-5 and getting a W-2. It's performing some sort of service, which could be posting on Instagram or showing up for an appearance or signing autographs. Those are all considered to be actively working. You can't do those things while you're in the United States. However, you can do those things when you are not on U.S. soil. And so what we've seen a lot of international athletes do is they sign deals with the collective or even with brands, and they do the work while they're home for Christmas or over summer break. They are out of the country for a tournament, and they do that. Oscar Jibwe at Kentucky was one of the first examples. They had a tournament in the Bahamas, and his agent lined up all these deals for while they were in the Bahamas, and he was given permission to spend part of the day going and doing these NIL deals, and they put him in an empty basketball arena, and they just shot content all day long for these brands. They also shot stock photos and videos that his agents could sell later because he can profit off his name, image, likeness. International athletes absolutely can profit off their name, image, and likeness, but not in the same way that athletes who are U.S. citizens can. If they're on a student visa, if they're on another type of visa, they're safer. And so we have seen athletes switching over to what's called a P1A, where there would be no restrictions. They would be able to do the same things that their American teammates can do. We see certain sports being more successful for that visa than others. But if they're on that student visa, you can do those NIL deals out of the country. You can also participate in group licensing. So if the school's doing jerseys for your entire team, or there's a playing card set that's your entire team, you can participate in that and license the use of your name, image, and likeness. You just can't actively promote it while you're in the US. So you can have the jersey and the cards, but you can't be posting about it on your social media while you're on US soil, because that part would be work. So people have gotten creative. There's all these workarounds over the years for the NIL part. Revenue sharing is what's more complicated. I'm actually recording a special edition of my podcast later.
That was my next question to you, is like, how are Canadian players going to partake in revenue sharing? Because Michigan, Michigan State, Penn State, Boston College, Denver's opting in, like all these big name college programs that send players to the NHL, they're all going to have revenue sharing.
Okay, so this was a huge, I know I keep saying last week, but like I was with all these administrators last week. And if there's one thing I want to get across to everybody, it's that they don't know the answers to these questions either. So we were having these discussions, and I'm recording a podcast later today with an immigration attorney who I've learned a lot from, because she and I were on a panel together and all the questions were for her. It was all these administrators and athletic directors, including one who sat on the panel with us, who didn't know the answers to these questions. And so it's her belief that international student athletes cannot receive revenue sharing, that you are being paid for work, for performance. Not only that, she thinks it's problematic to even be on a team when other people on the team are receiving revenue sharing, because we've seen cases in the past where international athletes tried, or not athletes, but international students tried to do unpaid internships, but where the other interns were all getting paid. And so if you're doing work that people would normally be paid for, that's still an issue with the student visa rules. And so she actually is concerned about them even being on the same team with revenue sharing, forget receiving it. However, some schools were telling us last week that they're being advised by their attorneys that they can call it a licensing deal, sort of like the group licensing I was talking about a minute ago with the jerseys and the trading cards, that really it fits under that same model, and that they can revenue share with their international athletes. And Charlie Baker, the NCAA president, he even last week had a comment where he said he thought it was allowed. And I saw a dozen attorneys I knew responding on Twitter and saying, wait a second, no, they can't. So you've got the president of the NCAA, who I'm not sure knows the answer to it. So
and then what could happen? Like, let's say a guy like Gavin McKenna gets revenue sharing dollars. Then he gets drafted in the NHL, and team, whoever drafts him in the first round and goes, it's an American team. They go to get him his work visa. And they're like, wait a sec, we're not giving you a visa. You broke the rules.
Yep.
Is that because you earned money on this visa, so we're not giving you a permanent work visa to play here in the National Hockey League? Like, that could happen, right?
Yeah, worst case scenario, that does happen. And even now, immigration attorneys are telling their clients, don't leave the country, because as you come back in, if you start getting questioned about your NIL and the other activities you have by a consular officer, you're with them for seconds. And so trying to prove to them that the deals you did were while you were home, like, it depends on who you have and how receptive they are. And a lot of the immigration attorneys, I don't want to get political, but a lot of them last week were saying, now's probably not the time to test the boundaries of your student visa.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it would be a terrible time. I don't think that that's political. I think that's reality. And I think it's really interesting, because I do think with Canada, like, Penn State just committed a massive commitment from this kid who's going to be the 12th, somewhere between 10 and maybe 15th overall in the draft. This kid Jackson Smith. And like, we're hearing big numbers that he's getting. He's, and we're seeing it in other schools. Like, there's a lot of tiptoe and a lot of tap dancing. And I just want to say, I want to read this comment from our chat, Kristi. I think you'll like it, from William J. Liam Hootenbrink Hoyo. He said, Kristi was my professor at UF. So somebody you taught at UF is here in the chat. Johnny, go ahead. I think you had something you wanted to say, but I wanted to read that comment.
Yeah, no, I'm happy you did. I saw that one earlier. I wanted to make sure that we got to that. But, my question, and again, like, I don't know if you have an answer, but maybe an opinion, and that's like all we can really ask for. I think about the schools that I played at. I went to UMass Amherst for my freshman and sophomore year, and then I went to Mercyhurst University my junior and senior year. And, the talk about college hockey is there's only 64 schools, right, that are Division I. So you want to grow and expand the amount of Division I schools there are. But the more the NIL continues, it feels like we're now limiting half of those 64 schools that can't afford to give out NIL. So is Division I college hockey going to shorten more than it will expand? because of these advantages. I mean, like you can't have a school like Mercyhurst competing with a school like Penn State as far as recruiting goes, when Penn State can offer a kid $200,000 and Mercyhurst can't. Like, I think we're now going to see, maybe 30 Division I hockey schools that are on an equal level playing field.
When I hear athletic departments talking about cutting sports, frankly, I've never heard men's ice hockey be on the list of sports to cut. There are other sports I think are more in danger. Men's gymnastics, some that we've seen, wrestling, we see get cut all the time. Now, wrestling and ice hockey have a benefit that at the Division I level, their championships actually make money. There are only 5 NCAA sports that make money on their championships, and wrestling and ice hockey are 2 of them. So I haven't heard a lot of discussion about cutting ice hockey. I know there are some Division I programs that don't do high level football that are talking about perhaps dropping down to Division II, but they can also, they can opt out of revenue sharing. That does make them less competitive for the folks at the very top who are going to be recruited by those major programs. But we have these new roster limits in place, and a lot of rosters are going to shrink because the new roster limits are smaller than the average size of the rosters were previously. And so I think it is going to push some talent down and be helpful in a number of sports that way.
It's really fascinating to see how this is all happening, and it is so it's here for hockey. Like, I remember you and I talking about this a few months ago, and we said, like, after you're done and your book is released, you and I are going to sit down and like go through some of these things, because hockey it's always one that just sort of hides in the weeds and kind of does their own thing, and you don't hear about it all that much. But let me get to the book a little bit, because like I said, I've read excerpts of the book, and my copy, I'll get it. I'll get it today, and then I'll hopefully get a chance to read it on the beach this weekend if we finally get some nice weather. But, we have a lot of hockey parents in this chat. We get messages all the time. Hey, my kid is playing here. My kid is playing there. And something that I think that I read, and correct me if I'm wrong, high school, as part of these new guidelines by the College Sports Commission, the settlement, August of your senior year now of high school, you can start receiving NIL benefits, correct? So that means colleges can start paying players when they're not, like, they haven't even arrived yet. And so I think learning about what's in your book and this playbook that you wrote, how to maximize your NIL, I think it's really, really valuable to a lot of people in our chat that like the college game, have kids that want to play in the college game. They might be good high school players. So I do think in Kristi's book, there is info for everybody. And I know Kristi's not she's not a hockey person, like, right? She told us that right off the bat. There are a lot of parts in this book that I think are very, very, there's a lot of good information for hockey parents and hockey players alike. So, first, the high school question, if you could provide some clarity around that. And then second, just kind of love to hear your thoughts on the book, and are you happy with the outcome from it, and the labor of love that it is to write a book?
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason I wanted to write it was because of the questions I get from parents. I mean, prior to NIL, a parent had never emailed me to ask me a question about college sports. I don't think ever. And now I get them every single day. So I started a Facebook group that I put the parents into, because then I can answer questions in front of everybody. And everybody has, the same basic questions about it. And I don't think there's enough education happening at that level, because high school athletes are making decisions based on these offers. They're going to start getting these financial aid agreements that talk about all the different pockets you're going to get money from, how much of a scholarship are you going to get, how much revenue sharing are you potentially going to get? Are you getting something also in addition, from the collective? What are you getting from scholarships from the university? I mean, it's a complicated package now going forward, and high school athletes and their parents are having to make these decisions with very little education on them. So the final chapter of the book is specifically about revenue sharing contracts, because in states that don't even have NIL for high school athletes, this is the first time these athletes are really being offered money. And if it sounds like a lot of money, they sign these contracts because they get excited, but there are some really bad terms in these contracts. And look, I consult with universities, so I'm not saying that they're, always bad or they're looking to exploit the athletes, but it's drafted to keep them safe, to keep you on their roster. But when I talk to the attorneys who are actually negotiating these, I don't do that. I don't negotiate them. But I had a lot of them weigh in for the book and give me like clauses out of contracts that were problematic and help explain to parents why is this a problem? And they're telling me that when you push back with the university, most of the time they're taking the edits that the attorneys suggest. So don't think it's a take it or leave it. It's absolutely not. These schools are negotiating with parents and lawyers that represent these athletes. They are giving on some of these things, and you don't want to lock yourself in or give up your name, image, and likeness for a longer term than you have to, just because that's what the first contract that comes says. So the book was really my attempt to try to educate parents, and hopefully some athletes will want to read it too, but especially parents, to help them get through this without signing contracts that they're going to regret later.
Yeah,
I guess
funny. Yeah, I got 20. I'm getting 25 copies of the book because I'm going to give at the start of the season. Our collective's going to give
reading for the Titans.
Not for the Titans, actually. Every player at BU, like, we're going to gift each guy on the team a book because listen, there's other ways that these guys can earn money that isn't through us, and probably ways I'm not thinking about, you're not thinking about, Johnny, but the book will kind of give them a little bit of a playbook on how to maximize themselves in college, because look, a lot of them will never earn money in pro. So why not try to cash in when you're in college? Like, I don't see any reason why, if schools are making money off you playing a sport for them, like, there should be some give and take. There really should.
Well, here's like the issue versus like the solution, I guess, that I had originally with NIL. Like I was, again, like, I was not a great player on the college teams I was on. And I always thought, like, oh, like, this guy's a full ride. Like, what an awesome thing that this kid is a full scholarship. And now if we add $200,000 on top of a full scholarship, like, it creates a divide in a locker room. Like, it certainly does. And that's just human nature. But if you're saying too, now that, like, someone like me, Colby knows I'm not shy to post on social media, but when I was in college, every coach we had, don't post on social media. It's only going to get you in trouble. Like, there's no good that can come in. Like, so my Twitter page, my Instagram page, all that stuff was, like, pretty quiet, like, when I was a college athlete, because I didn't want to do anything or post anything that the NCAA can get me in trouble, But if that has changed too, and, let's quote unquote bad players on college teams, I just don't know how else to say that.
There isn't, by the way. If you're a Division I athlete, you're not a bad hockey player.
You're not a bad player, but if you're, if you're not playing a lot and you don't have
you're still not a bad player.
But you can still make money and get paid, which is what I'm saying. So, like, someone like me who wasn't on a full ride, who wouldn't get NIL for the way I played, I could still go make money doing brand deals and all that stuff. When I was in college, if you got paid $1, guess what? Your NCAA is your what's the word I'm thinking?
Your advisor couldn't pay for dinner, Kristi, when you go. I had an advisor who later became my agent, who now is just a very, very good friend. Like, we would go eat, and he would come to watch us play. Even before college, he'd be like, he followed the rules. I don't think anybody follows the rules anymore, Kristi, but and so, like, we'd literally go to T's Pub with him because he represented my roommate as well. And we would go out and we'd get food, and, like, we'd have to have separate checks. Like, it's crazy.
Not like that at all anymore. No, that's not the world anymore at all. And that's why in the book, I wanted it to be athletes you've never heard of before. I wanted the reader to see anyone can do this, and they're making money from so many different things. I mean, I played softball my whole life, and then I did not play in college. So in college, I taught pitching lessons on the side to make money. And this would have been like, I graduated high school in 2000. So this is like, the early aughts. I made really good money teaching pitching lessons at a ballpark that was right down the street from my university, because I wasn't a student athlete. So I was allowed to do that. The amount of money that parents will spend on their youth athletes, and I think we all know it's insane. And so there have been platforms that have popped up where you don't even have to teach lessons in person. You can have, like, for pitching, I could have recorded lessons where I'm teaching somebody how to throw different pitches, or I could do one-on-ones where they send a video pitching and I analyze it and send it back on my own time. And so you've got athletes making money that way. There's athletes writing books. They're making money on their music. There's a gymnast in the book that was at UF, Leah Clapper. She invented the first gymnastics board game. I mean, there's just an endless number of things that you can do that you just simply weren't allowed to do previously. So you don't have to be, a social media superstar. And Colby, I don't know if you remember, but when you and I first met, you told me hockey players were not going to get into the NIL game because
social media game.
Yeah, you told me, you said, we don't do that. Like, our coaches have always told us not to do that. None of us are active on social media.
He makes fun of me every day still.
I still see fewer hockey deals probably than any other sport. It's true.
Yeah. I think, look, Kristi, just from my own personal experience now doing some of these deals, we stay away. Like I don't think we've done one contract that had a social media component in the contract. Honestly, I think we've done signing things. We've done, way back when we started, there was the charitable component before that kind of got pushed out a little bit. But there's been I honestly, I can't think of a single deal that had social media, but more and more of the kids are like Jonny, where they're willing to do the social media stuff. But listen, we're creating the next wave of entrepreneurs, of like self-made entrepreneurs. And that's where Jonny and I kind of argued about this before the show, where he's like, I don't like what NIL is doing, to college sports. And listen, you can easily come up with a bunch of pros and a bunch of cons, but that's anything in this world. And I think that the pros outweigh the cons. Like, I believe that if Florida or Alabama is making millions and millions and millions of dollars off these guys, like, they should get their cut. And I truly and wholeheartedly believe it. And it's coming to hockey, and I love it. And, if you wouldn't mind, if you could share with us on a social media, or maybe you could put it in the chat. I want to listen to the podcast you're talking about with the immigration lawyer, because I still believe the immigration thing in hockey is going to be more on the forefront than anything else, because of all these, really, really good Canadian players that are wanting to come now to play college hockey because of this new rule. You used to have to choose at like 15 years old. Am I going major junior in Canada, or am I going the NCAA route? You don't have to make that decision anymore. Now we have the best development league in the US is the United States Hockey League. It's a proven development path for players to go to college hockey. You keep your eligibility, no issues. Now the CHL is another path players can take. And, you can argue either side of it, but it's that immigration piece that, again, it has nothing to do with they got to change the immigration laws. Like, they seem, and that's where I'm most fascinated in this stuff. And so I'd love to listen to the podcast that you're doing later with the immigration lawyer, because like, I think that's just it pertains so much to hockey. Jonny, I don't know if you have something to say. You look like you wanted to add something.
I just had like one last question that kind of relates to all this and ties it in a little bit. And again, Dylan Lepresti with another good point. I'm not necessarily sure I agree with what Dylan said. He said like kids who get NIL shouldn't get full rides.
Yeah, I disagree with that too. Yeah,
I don't fully agree with it, but I think the premise, and this is where I'll make my own spin. There are kids who commit to college just for 1 year and want to play 1 year of NCAA sports and go sign their pro deal. And then there are the other kids who don't have the full ride that probably end up staying the 4 years, whose parents are paying for 4 years of university and probably won't receive much NIL either. But like, how do we make that more fair almost? Like, should a kid who's going to play in the NHL get a full ride on top of the $200K NIL, and then another kid who worked at like
I don't get. I mean, this is like
fair. I understand.
America's built on. It's no such thing as fair.
But again, like, the team dynamic of it is a little messed up. No?
Well, we're seeing in football and basketball players coming back when you thought they would have gone into the draft previously, but now they're coming back because they can make more money from NIL, and this will be exacerbated by revenue sharing, than they can going into the NFL, or they know they need to develop another year, or their agents are telling them, they need to develop another year. So we're actually seeing in football and basketball guys stay longer, especially in basketball. It's been super interesting to watch, and you're not getting as many of the one and dones. And so I wonder if that will trickle into other sports as well.
Yeah, and I just, Jonny, starting at Pee-wee when you're 12, the best players play more. And then you get older, and the best players get an offer sooner. They make better teams. Like, this whole dynamic that you're worried about, this dynamic starts at Pee-wees, where the best kids are always going to get more. Like, that's not what I'm saying. The smartest kids are going to go to the Ivy League schools. The best players are going to make the U.S. national team or Canadian World Juniors or whatever. So this dynamic that you're worried about, that's just life, man. That's in any business you do, for the most part.
When you commit to a college, the university is investing in you. So shouldn't universities be investing in a 4-year college player versus a kid who's going to be a one and done that's making money on top of it. Like, I think that's just something that the school should look at. Like, if
although
you
that's not what they're doing. Like, if you look at the revenue sharing contracts they're sending out, very few of them are sending out multi-year contracts. They're sending out 1 year because they aren't willing to make the long-term investment in you. And so, like, as an athlete, like, do I want to make a long-term investment in them if they're not making one in me?
Yeah,
Johnny, that's the reverse of this. Is there's a lot of schools that are not, like, they're pushing guys out the door. They're saying, look, you can come back, but you're never going to play. That's basically kicking a guy off. Like, you're basically kicking a guy off the team. So it does go both ways. Coaches can up and leave. So I think players, I do think, Kristi, that they could come up with a little bit more of a, you get one transfer, and then, there's could be like, if you leave after 1 year, you have to repay X or something like that. Like,
some of them have that. Some of the contracts have that in it. They either have buyouts that another school would have to pay if they're, sort of actively recruiting to somebody to transfer, which they're not supposed to do. But we all know that they're doing it. You've got buyouts, and there's a case right now. I don't think it's been filed in court yet, but and I'm the worst because I can't remember his name. Nico Iamaleava, the quarterback from Tennessee, he had a brother who had committed to Arkansas. When Nico decided to go to UCLA, his brother also decided to go to UCLA.
I saw this.
Hadn't even been paid by Arkansas yet. And Arkansas's collective is coming after him for what's called liquidated damages because he committed and then didn't come there. So there's going to be a lot more of that happening to try and curb all this player movement. But at the end of the day, the NCAA, I think, is hesitant to put anything in place as far as player movement goes, because it's all subject to antitrust laws. They know somebody's going to file a lawsuit, and they know they don't have a leg to stand on. So unless they're employees and they're collectively bargaining and they're agreeing to these restrictions the way that professional athletes do, I don't think we're going to see any new restrictions come in place. But I 100% will see more in these revenue sharing contracts trying to make it more difficult for guys to leave.
Yeah. It's interesting stuff. It's fascinating. Vic, I don't know if you have a picture of the book you can put on the screen. I know Vic there's a picture of the book. Kristi has one in the low corner. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it Barnes and Noble, right? Kristi, yep. What about in Canada? Where can people in Canada get the book? Amazon?
It should be at all the major retailers now. It originally wasn't supposed to come out until July 2nd, but because of the House settlement, they pushed up the date. It came out last Tuesday. And so some of the supply chain, like trying to get the books to the warehouses for the different stores, is still catching up. And it's why the Amazon dates have shown delivery a little bit later in the month. But the publisher tells me. Yeah, the publisher tells me it's all going to catch up. In fact, I have not received the copy I pre-ordered. I pre-ordered a copy just to know when it would come, and mine still has not come yet. So I know that there's a little bit of a lag there. There's also going to be an audiobook in September, I believe, is when they're targeting that coming out. And I'll have some in-person stuff.
Did you do the audio?
I did not do the audio.
Okay.
I didn't. They asked me, did I mind if somebody else did it? And I said, no, please have at it. I don't need to do the audio.
we had Kenny Albert on our show the other day, and Kenny did the audio for his book. And you almost have to with Kenny because his voice is just so unique. When Molly wrote her book, I was like, you should do the audio. She has but she didn't. So I'm always curious to know if people do that. So Vic, make sure you put the link to get the book in the chat one more time. I know you've already done it, but let's make sure we put it in the chat. I saw Jeremiah already said the book's in my inbox. So I think we have such a dedicated group of people that are here with us on this show every day, Kristi, that I think when we bring someone on and we talk about something that they're, that they've done, they trust us to a certain amount where they actually will get it and read it. So I'm looking forward to diving into it. My Amazon delivery is today. It said it was going to take 3 weeks, and it's only been 10 days. So that's a win. We really appreciate you coming on today, and we'll look for your social media when you start sharing out that podcast that you do about immigration today, because again, to me, that's the biggest influence on our neck of the woods in hockey is how does this immigration thing either aid or not aid Canadian hockey players coming and playing here in the NCAA. That's such a big topic. So
it should be out tomorrow. So I'll make sure I get it to you.
Good.
Thank you, Kristi.
We'll definitely promote it. Yeah. Thanks for coming on today. I know we kept you for 45 minutes. I said it would be quicker than that. But we're really grateful to hear some of your knowledge and your information on this stuff.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Great to meet you as well. Awesome stuff, Colby. Like, that stuff fires me up a lot, as you can tell.
Yeah.
It's just crazy to see where it's gone in 10 years, 5 years, where it's going to go.
Yeah. I didn't realize that you were a socialist, by the way. I didn't know you wanted everybody to just get the same, and nobody should get more. And
that's not at all what I'm saying.
I saw New York Marine.
I saw the comment. Yeah, it was a
New York Marine said that, but I thought
you understood what I was asking, right?
Listen, I get what you're talking about, that dynamic in the locker room, but I don't know, man. Like, I think those dynamics already exist with players that play in the World Juniors, and they have Bauer sponsorship deals, and like, those dynamics have always existed. Now there's just more money components behind it. And look, these guys are all trying to get to pro hockey, and in pro hockey, the best players make more money, right? And so
yeah, but that's pro.
I understand it, but dude, let me tell you something, and you know this. Even if you're a Division I hockey player, which you were at a big program like you were, you're competing against the best non-players in the world, non-NHL players in the world. And it's not just at that level, but you've gotten to not the top of the pyramid, but very, very close to the top of the pyramid. And so it's just what you're going to have to deal with and work with. So I do see somebody's asking about the puppy. Rocket is making one of his first cameos on the show today. He came and jumped up on my lap. He's not a big camera guy, Rocket. It's not like Oliver, who's always dying to be on the camera. So anyways, I thought that was interesting. I hope everybody else did. Again, I got to tell you guys something. We don't have a lot of hockey to talk about right now. There's only 2 teams playing. We could have our last game of the season tomorrow. And if that's the case, if this series ends tomorrow, we'll be Monday to Thursday this week. If we get to game 7, we'll go through Friday. And then starting next week, we're going back to 4 days. And at that point, we'll go live shows through the end of the month. We'll get through the draft leading into free agency kind of, and that'll be it. I know I said I'd give people some updates on that stuff, but that's kind of how we're managing this moving forward here.
I will say too, Colby, I spoke to Tyler last night. I'm not in the discussions yet, but I'm going to go to Edmonton. I think if it goes to game 7, I'm going to book a flight and go and try to go to the game.
Cool. Wearing a Florida Panthers jersey or what?
No, at that point, listen, if the Panthers don't close out in 6, I'll be rooting for Edmonton openly. I picked Panthers in 6, and now I've been called like a Oilers hater, and I've embraced that up until game 6. But if it goes to 7, I'll probably be rooting for the Oilers. I mean, I still am like rooting. Again, like, I have more personal connections to the Oilers than I do to the Panthers. So I'd like to see the Oilers win. But again, like, I made my prediction. I thought the Panthers were a better team. I still think they are. You said
Panthers in 6. Your prediction's alive.
Yeah.
Your prediction's alive.
Yeah.
You know who needs to play better and do more if they're going to win a Stanley Cup is the big dogs. Connor McDavid has been kept somewhat in check the last couple of games. He really has. Like, give Florida a lot of credit, right, for just constantly being on top of him. But he's going to have to go to another level, right? You guys have all said he deserves. Okay, well, if he wants to deserve a cup, he better go, figure out a way to get through Forsling and Ekblad and that top 4 for Florida, because right now it's just not it's not been good enough for his team to win. So I think we still have Bet365, Johnny.
Yeah, and Vic said he has a live shot of me in Edmonton. I don't know what this is gonna.
That is a John. Very well done, Vic. Well timed. Well done. Well timed and well done. And Ned in the chat says, no one says this before, but the Oilers really miss Hyman. Completely agree. We have not made a big enough piece of that because Corey Perry seemingly just filled right into that sort of net front spot. But of course, that is a great point. You're missing Hyman. There's no doubt about it. That's a huge loss.
One other thing too that Biz brought up after the game on Saturday, which I wanted to bring up before Kristi got on here. Actually, I'm happy you just said that because now I remembered. We talked about Knobloch pushing the right buttons, making lineup changes. Evander Kane in games 1 and 2 played 22 minutes game 1, 24 and a half minutes, game 2. The last 3, and he had a pretty significant impact in those games. Obviously scores that goal in game 2, a snipe from the left side. Games 3, 4, and 5. 3 and 4, he played 13:42 on the dot in both games. And in game 5, played 14 minutes, 2 seconds.
How many bad penalties has he taken?
Granted, I guess games 1 and 2 also had overtimes. So that probably has a little bit to do with it. So did game 4, though. But
has anybody taken more stupid penalties than him?
No, but he's just getting buried on the fourth line, and
if you can't trust him, then you can't put him on the ice, and the trust factor has gone down. But with all the penalties, he's put his team in really bad situations. So
he's a guy that I would look for, though, to maybe get bumped back up the lineup because they need him.
Oh yeah.
He's an important guy in their lineup, and I agree with your point of the dumb penalties. Like, my friends were joking it's minus 1,000 for Evander Kane to take a penalty in game 3, and he did. But that's something to look for, and something Biz pointed out after the game. But I saw Mitch Hatch say something about it's crazy that McDavid's getting all the Conn Smythe talk and Leon's not. So I do want to give a quick word from our sponsor, Bet365. If you want to get in on the action for Stanley Cup playoffs, Bet365. They got you from game props, player props, totals, and the money line. You can even bet on futures like series winners and the Stanley Cup champions and much, much more. Whatever your bet is, it's never ordinary at Bet365. So download the app and get in on the game, an official partner of the Stanley Cup playoffs. And remember, you must be 19 or older. If I'm someone who thinks Edmonton is going to win, I think there's better value to take Leon Draisaitl to win the Conn Smythe than there is for Edmonton to come back and win the series. Like it's worth it to take that as opposed to Edmonton coming back and win, I think. And on the flip side, Colby, do you think there is any possibility where Edmonton wins this series, but Florida, Marchand, or Bennett win a Conn Smythe? I don't see that happening.
Listen, there's a lot of recency bias, so yeah. I don't know, honestly. Maybe like McDavid won it. I mean, who's been more impactful than Bennett and McDavid so far? So that's what I would say. So, yeah. All right, Johnny, listen, that's what we got for the day. Good show today, long one. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll preview game 6. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to leave your comments. Don't forget to get the automatic downloads on. Appreciate how active everybody was in the chat today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed Kristi. Like we said, we're trying to bring some just different voices to the show here over these last couple of weeks, because how much can we go in circles talking about Podkolzin, losing his man on the face-off. Yeah, I mean, nobody likes to argue a dumber point than you. So we hope everybody has a great day. And as always, we'll see you back here at 9 a.m. tomorrow.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Saravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern, Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe.